city, I've been browsing. Treading water that they drowning. My head on a swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 161 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at DynastyDadFF. Tonight's show, we had Scott Connor on last week. If you guys haven't checked that out, talked a lot about wide receiver philosophy and some a little bit deeper thinking. We've been covering a lot of values. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about trade tips. We're going to give you 10 Smash trading tips, and really, Mung and I are going to run you through how we go about making dynasty trades. So without further ado, my man in the living room, Mung, how you doing today, brother?
Hey, good. What's going on, man? You guys can find me on Twitter at FFA_Mung. That's MENG. And a lot going on. I mean, we've had OTA news, and we're deep into best ball season. We're almost getting to redraft season, and just so much to talk about. Not only player news, but, we still want to hit on these general topics where the overarching strategy is sometimes more important than your individual player takes, right? Because much like sports betting in the fantasy industry, it's considered pretty good if you even hit on 60% of your takes versus the other 40. So it's not like someone's going to be hitting 9 out of 10 of their player takes. So it's really more about roster building and building those trade relationships like we're going to talk about tonight.
And that's something I think over the years you and I have really tried to hammer home is process over results, and really trying to look at profiles and how we do things and the cyclical nature of dynasty and when to make trades, when not. We're going to just cover so many different things, and I'm excited to open that up. You can see behind me, we got the Garrett Wilson signed jersey. You guys still have a couple of days, and the exciting thing is all you got to do is you got to sign up for the Smash Accept Patreon. Right now, there's a 7-day free trial. So literally there is no strings attached. There's nothing. You get a 7-day free trial. You're automatically entered to win the Garrett Wilson signed jersey behind me. I wanted to wear it for the podcast. The thing is just awesome. Can't wait to give that away. But we're going to announce the winner on Father's Day. Make sure one of you guys gets that awesome jersey, that cool giveaway. So Mung, what I did was I took the successful business practices of trading in the business world and tried to talk about it a little bit in our world, because a lot of times we look at, depending on how you play dynasty, we look at it either as a business, we look at it as a fun hobby. There's so many different ways. We all look at it a little bit different, but I'm going to break these down one at a time. The first rule I have is always have a trade plan. You and I talk about this all the time. I mean, the key here is to stick to your plan. Each trade and roster construction that you guys have should go in a desired direction. Every trade that you guys have, waivers, everything that you do should lead you towards a specific direction. We talk a lot about top 3, bottom 3, and most of our teams that we have at Smash Accept, we don't have those teams that hover in the middle. We talk about really having a direction, and I keep getting these Twitter questions. They're like, Dad, isn't this side better than that side when it comes to trade value? And you're like, if this is your desired direction, right? Like, it's not all about player X versus player Y. It's which direction do you want to go? Why do you want to do there? And have some conviction with that, because I know a lot of people waffle in the middle, right? And that was the biggest reason that we created this podcast. We didn't want people sitting there in the middle. We want you guys to either push in or move towards that rebuild and really kind of embrace the principles.
Right. And we get a lot of trade questions where rebuilding teams outperform their expectations, right? So if you were starting a rebuild last offseason, a year ago, and you hit on guys like Garrett Wilson or Kenneth Walker, and then you ended up being maybe close to contention halfway through that season, if you ended up pushing all in and you didn't make it, well, then you're back in the same boat this year, right? Whereas, like you said, if you hashtag trust the process and you take those wins, you're happy about them, your team's moving in the right direction, but then you're not giving up the first that you accumulated in said rebuild for older veterans who may or may not pan out. We always say, right, you should always look to win every single year if it's realistic, but really you have to be realistic about your own projections for your rosters. And also it applies to trades, right? If you have I have Matthew Stafford on a couple of different rosters that I bought for dirt cheap when people thought there was a possibility that he might retire last year after the neck injury and all the injury issues. And now I'm looking to flip a few shares of Stafford, but obviously I'm not going to go to that team that has 6 firsts and is not looking to contend this year because it simply doesn't make sense. It's just a waste of time for both of us, whereas you should be targeting contending rosters. So really just evaluating your own roster well, and then also the other team's roster when you're looking to send trade offers.
I love that. And that kind of goes into our next principle is really, you and I talk about it all the time, is like knowing your league mates and what direction they want to go and try to do things that way. The tricky thing is a lot of you guys are coming and they're like, Dad, I mean, I probably get 20, 30 DMs a week. They're like, Dad, we want to start our rebuild process. What do we do? And they just struggle they're like, should I get Cam Akers thrown in this deal instead of second round pick? Should I get this guy? And it's like, you have to fully embrace it to move towards a direction. Again, if you guys want us to break down your rosters, make sure you guys send them in here. We can look at them over. We do that in the Patreon all the time. Guys are like, hey, is this a roster that I should be looking to contend? Is one that I should be, potentially looking to rebuild? What should I do with these rosters? What are some moves to make? And I think that's something that, over the years, something that you and I have done a lot of and will continue to do. So step 2, and this is where we start to break things down a little bit, is treat trading like a business. So when you do things, we talk about this all the time. Part of that is know your league mates and your trade partners. You know how easy it is to, fracture a relationship when it comes to the business world. It's the same as when you get into a trade world. When you make a trade offer and it gets rejected and you mock that person or you do something in that sense. Like, having these trade partners, knowing their tendencies and what they do is absolutely paramount to the success. We talked about it with Scott, where it's like, as soon as you move out one of those guys, now you went from having 11 trade partners, 11 guys that you could, conduct business with, down to 10. You want to keep it at the maximum amount possible your entire, time that you're in that league, because that can really have a trickle down effect. Now, all of a sudden, there are 25 players that you're not going to get because of the way that you talk to another league mate.
Right. We touched on that just last week, right? As you were saying on the episode with Scott. So you guys should definitely check that out. We talked about a lot of broad strategies, but I'll repeat myself once again, right? It's all about relationships, both fantasy football and life. Mutual respect is so important. And especially when you're a keyboard warrior, right? No one gets to see you face to face, or at least for the most part, when you're making trade offers. I've had a few fun FaceTimes with close friends when we're doing actual live trade negotiations, right? On a quick video chat or something. Those are always fun. But for the most part, you're typing back and forth in DMs or trade offers. And it's important to know that tone is difficult to come across sometimes, right? So if you're even not trying to mock someone or make fun of someone, even if you're listing some stats, right, you could come across as condescending. So just make sure that you're being nice. And it's just like rule number 1 of a job interview or something, where basically it doesn't necessarily matter if you're a better trade negotiator or if you know more about players. At the end of the day, are you someone that people want to trade with, right? Are you lecturing them in DMs? Oh, like, this is dumb. Like, how could you value this player as a first? Sometimes it's better to just move on and understand that people value players differently. So again, just knowing that. And then also a little rule of thumb, you talked about knowing the other dynasty GMs in your leagues, right? And sometimes it's just little stuff that over the years, right? Who cares about the underwear Olympics? Who's got the googly eyes for a player as soon as they run a sub 4.4? That's the kind of team that you want to target if you're trying to sell a guy like maybe Devon Achane, right? Or who's that guy who's got the Ohio State Buckeyes logo in their Twitter profile? If you found someone through a Twitter league, right? And maybe they're going to overpay for CJ Stroud in your league. So maybe you target them. And it's just little stuff like that over the years you kind of gain from experience.
I like that Twitter one because I play in a couple Twitter leagues where I saw the guys, his AVI was CeeDee Lamb. So I made an offer and he's like, how did you know? And you're like, you pick up those little details. To your point, there's those guys that, always are trying to buy 24 first. There's those guys, are always trying to buy veterans. Those guys that, if it's a specific locale, they're always trying to buy Bengals. They're trying to buy Eagles. They're trying to do those certain things. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more about buying profiles instead of particular, players that you fall in love with. But the one thing that I want to add to what you were saying is you can do that in your trade negotiation, but sometimes the league chat, Mung, can really sway things in the wrong direction. Like I had a guy make a comment the other day, and one of the other owners in there go, "Man, I don't want to trade with that guy if he's going to start talking like that." And being able to shame somebody on another trade, or, "Oh, I would have given you more." There's so much more in there, and I think, like in the business world, that goes more with your human relations and how you do things. And the more you can have that, that flow where you're going to have a good conversation, where you're going to have, positive trade talks. Sometimes that other part of that, where they're talking about some other trade that they're not even involved with, can really steer things in the wrong direction. The question I get a lot lately, Mung, and I want to get your take on it, is trade responses. So there's so many people out there, they're like, if I don't like a trade, is it okay to just hit decline? Should I write, "Oh, that's a good offer, but maybe not"? Should I counter? Where do we go from that? There's so many people that just struggle with that aspect of it. You and I feel like it's just second nature because we've been doing so long, but we have a lot of new listeners out there, and they're like, what's proper etiquette when you're declining a trade if you don't want any part of it? And then how do you go about doing the counter? I mean, should I counter in the DM? Should I send another blind offer back and forth? Talk to me a little bit about the negotiation process there, because it is an art form as well. We talked about knowing people, but there is an art form of trying to say the right words and do the right thing to make a trade negotiation continue.
Sure. And I guess it comes down to two things, right? One is the golden rule that we all learned as kids, right? Do unto others as you want to be done unto yourself, right? So if you send a trade offer and it gets declined with no reply, how do you feel about that, right? Obviously, we would all prefer some sort of response. And the second thing is the worst response is no response, right? Don't let trade offers just sit in your inbox for weeks and weeks. And obviously there are exceptions, right? Emergencies come up, life happens, and not everyone is able to respond right away. That's perfectly fine. But at the same time, you shouldn't just be leaving trade offers in your inbox unread or unresponded to for weeks on end, right? At that point, maybe you just shouldn't be in that league. And again, life happens, everyone's busy, but it's just common courtesy, if you can, to reply in a timely fashion. So I think in general, and I've been guilty of it too, where I just decline with no counter sometimes or no response, because I am pretty busy some weeks. So I think obviously you want to try to be as responsive as possible. At the very least, I try to say, hey, I think we're just pretty far apart on this guy. So, there's no counter necessarily that I saw that could work. But if there is, it's best to talk through your thought process, because when you open a dialogue, right, that's ultimately how business deals and also trades in Dynasty get done, is when you can come to a middle ground on a player's valuation.
See, now going to the business world, I almost look at it as like when you're filling out evaluations or doing paperwork, right? You start out in the industry and you're writing big detailed information, and then you get to a point later on where you're just kind of doing a little bit less and a little bit less. And we have this situation where people in the beginning, I find out when they're brand new to Dynasty, they want to write out a blurb of why they don't want that trade. And then we get to after a while in a league, this is, I guess, me just saying, just give them some kind of explanation, let them know a little bit, because the next step that's part of step 2 that I've really been trying to hone my skills and work on this year is approach managers from a how can I help you win approach, right? Like we all look at it. When today I did a thread on Chris Godwin that I wanted to go out and buy Chris Godwin. But what I wanted to do was go to the owners that had Chris Godwin and say, hey, what can we do? What do you like on my team? How can I help you get something off of here? Is there a player that you like? I think a lot of times we all want to win trades. That is the name of the game, but subtle wins. If you go there, the best deals I find are the ones where, I gave up 10% more than I wanted to, and you gave up 10% more than you wanted to, but we were, you're sitting on that fence. You're like, ooh, was that a good trade? Wasn't it? Like, I feel good about it, but I'm not sure. And I think when you go to the other owner and say, hey, how can I help you win? How can I help you get to this? And that's really easy when you have a rebuild team and a win now team. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult when you're both middle ground or both in the same direction. But I think you can come to an understanding of this negotiation here is going to further our relationship. I'm going to give and take a little bit. And that's why I talk a lot about, third round picks or sweeteners. And we kind of do those things because it's like a good feeling where I'm like, let me throw you a third and we'll get this thing done.
Yeah. And oftentimes trades are win-win, right? You don't have to win a trade by being shady, sending out an offer for a player right after he tore his ACL or something, hoping the other GM didn't see the news. Or you don't have to, a new orphan and a new dynasty GM just took over the team and they're not super familiar with Superflex, and you get Josh Allen for a couple seconds because they don't know how to value quarterbacks just yet. Those aren't the type of wins we're talking about, right? I think one of my favorite examples is when you trade for a player that you believe in or sell a player that you don't, even though you're selling for around their market value. So, for example, back in 2018, 2019, you might have been able to sell Baker Mayfield for Josh Allen plus if you believed in Josh Allen, if you didn't believe in Baker Mayfield, whatever it might be, and it would have been a perfectly fair deal. But looking back, if you really did believe in Allen, then you knew that was going to be a win for you, or at least you hoped it would be, without fleecing the other dynasty GM. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about winning trades, right? We're not talking about taking advantage of anybody.
Yeah, very good point. And I think that's one thing that we have really hit on in the past years. And we talk about insulated trades, but we're almost every single year ahead of the curve of who's going to break out, who's going to be there. And there's a lot of there's an eye for that. And then there's some luck as well, but we hit on those kind of things. So it's like at one point, it doesn't feel like a win, but it shifts to that way. So far we've talked about having a trade plan, treating trading like a business partner. Then the third one is use your dynasty resources. Like there's so many guys right now, you have so much at your disposal. I mean, not just in our Patreon where you can get the trade value chart, our ADP, rankings from you and myself. But there's other ones. I mean, the Dynasty Trade Calculator is fantastic. I just recently stumbled across bulletproof.com. Phenomenal tools on there where you can see the ADP. You click on a player, it's going to show you recent dynasty trades. There's so many things out there, but this is the caveat, right? There are great tools out there. The biggest thing I see is people really trying to look at Keep Trade Cut or look at DLF or look at one of these and throw it in the other person's face. Or they're trying to look at which one does that guy use and try to move around on that. I think these are all tools. We don't need to use any of them as an end all be all. People are like, well, Dad, you have player X in the Patreon above player Y. Why wouldn't you make that trade? And there's more to it than that. Or they might say, you know what, the Dynasty Trade Calculator says that this player's a 42 and this player's a 38. You should take this trade. You don't want to take those tools and push them on someone. You want to make them as a tool to give you an educated guess, to give you that best possible resource to make those decisions that you ultimately are making you have those small wins.
Right. Ultimately, these resources are a guide, right? It helps you understand what the general market consensus is on given players. So then you can then go either make offers or evaluate the offers that you received. Mm-hmm. But I would challenge anyone out there, even if you're starting out, to try and create your own dynasty rankings, because that's where you can see where you value certain players compared to the market, right? So I'm much higher on, say, a guy like Marquise Brown. So even if I'm paying somebody who's valued over him in ADP and getting Brown in return, I would consider that a win because of the gap between my ranking and ADP or market value. But at the same time, it's important to understand that sometimes people who are holding on to certain players have really high, sky-high expectations for them, right? I've been trying to buy Kadarius Toney in some leagues, and the teams who have Toney are similarly high on him. So it's not always going to work out just because the market is lower on a player that you like or higher on a player that you don't like.
Yeah, and I like that rankings because a lot of times we're trying to really conduct that in the Patreon where, they can look at your rankings, they can look at my rankings, but it's a matter of making your own, and if you guys go over to fantasypros.com, you can literally make your own rankings. You can put it on there. And I think the important part about that is making your rankings and then drawing your own tiers in there. You know, we all have different sets of tiers. You and I talk about it all the time, trying to move around in said tiers. Hollywood Brown is a perfect example where you and I are differing a little bit as far as where we're at on values. So if we were making that trade and I have him down here and you have him up here, you know where you can make some headway, you know, and you can make some trade value in there. So I like that a lot. And I think it's make your own tiers because, you know, there is dynasty market value, but at the end of the day, it's your team. It's your business. You're the manager of that particular team. So don't feel like just because that's the way, and I'm saying go make a crazy trade, something that's way out there, use the tools. But if it's off by a couple points on somebody's calculator or a spot or two on their ranking and you believe it, ultimately you're there to have fun. That's what you want to do with your team. You run it the way that you want to do it. We're here to help in all those certain ways.
Well, and it's easier said than done, right? I would suggest that it's a hard exercise. It takes a lot of time, and I would suggest starting fresh, right? Don't go off of current rankings or ADP. Just start making your own rankings. And sometimes when you then look at your rankings compared to ADP, you're scrolling and scrolling for a guy. You're like, where is he? How far down do I have to scroll? Because I've got him up at 20th overall or something. Am I wrong? Or is this someone that I really need to be buying because I'm so much higher on them? Is it someone I need to be selling because I'm so much lower on them? You know, this happened last offseason, right? Gabriel Davis is an example of someone who I was super low on compared to the market, who I just didn't believe in. So I was looking, I remember doing my rankings and I was scrolling through DLF ADP. I'm like, where is he? And he was a full 30 or so spots higher than where I had him ranked. And I said, man, I got to go out and sell him in the 2 leagues where I have Gabe Davis because clearly there's a big gap between how I'm valuing him versus the market as a whole.
Yeah, and you can play that. I mean, you know, again, going back to insulated trades, I was talking about it today with a guy that was trying to make a trade. And this time last year, I was big on Travis Etienne. And I traded Travis Etienne and my second, or I'm sorry, I traded Austin Eckler in my second for Travis Etienne and this guy's first, which ended up being the 104. So at this point now, both Etienne and the 104, where I got Jahmyr Gibbs, are both worth more than what Austin Eckler is right now. And that pick ended up being the 212 because I won it all. But it's a matter of like looking at ahead of time, see where people's values are. He felt great when he made that trade, you know, because Austin Eckler, he was the RB1. It helped him out. But at the end of the day, you know, it's a matter of finding where those values are. The next one, number 4, is protect your draft capital. So this is one right now I have struggled with in years past. You know as well as I have in Smash Except One, and John's the same way. It was like trading picks like candy, right? Then I started accumulating them and working around. But rookie picks are the assets that insulate your investment, right? If you have your rookie pick, your options of what you do as a team are so much different than if you don't. If you don't have it, it's almost like you're playing redraft, right? Like I don't control my own pick. So therefore, what does it matter? I don't need to sell out completely to get that 101. You know, we look at a top 3, bottom 3 mentality. That 24 first is an asset that's best held onto and used at the proper time. So if you are all in, I see so many people right now, Mung, they're buying depreciating assets in June to fill in their roster. And I put a tweet out about this and it got a pretty good traction there, but it's like, buying Derrick Henry right now for your 24 first, you're like, oh, but Dad, it's a late 24 first. Derrick Henry goes down in training camp, and that is a dead asset. That is a depreciating asset. You know, like I'm all about go out and buy that cheaper guy to fill in there if you need that. But hold on to that 24 first. We talk about it every year about when the right time to strike is, and that's different in every league. It's different for every team. But using that 24 first as a guy, I saw somebody today buy DeAndre Hopkins for a 24 first. And I'm like, that is not something that looks like it's going to win on paper for you. You know, you'll be able to buy DeAndre Hopkins at week 8, week 10, same kind of price as long as he's still there. So, I mean, the more we do this, the more we realize draft capital is what insulates your team. It's what keeps you viable. And how many times have you in the past, Mung, been like, okay, I really need to buy a player here for that, week 12 to 15 stretch, and now you don't have a 24 first. So now you're trying to figure out what kind of assets can you move and still be viable.
Yeah, and it's really, really tough to rebuild when you don't have your coming year picks, right? Because as soon as you make that first trade to potentially sell off and rebuild, then the team who does have your future first immediately has all the leverage on you, right? I was responding to a question on Twitter earlier today where they said they were rebuilding. And I said, okay, well, you don't necessarily want this player because it's going to make your 2024 first a bit later, assuming they score points. And he said, oh, well, I don't have my first. Well, it's possible to rebuild without your first, especially if you're doing well and you have other draft capital. But ultimately, you're hoping your first is going to be 101 or 102, and then you'll be able to either flip that pick or get a high value player for it.
Well, yeah, we talked about the 101 is usually about 30% more value than the 102. Next year, that could be at least 50% more, if not. I mean, it is like this year where Bijan was your golden ticket. You know, your Caleb Williams, if you have that 101, that's why we talk about in the rebuild process. Step number 2 after assessing your team is get your first. You know, don't like disguise it there. Try to find a way to get it back in there, because if you don't have that, you know, you're almost running in a treadmill trying to figure out a way. Yeah, you can trade Cooper Kupp for Drake London and something, right? But that's not the same as getting when you're in a rebuild and you're getting that 101, every trade you make is inching yourself closer to that premium asset, where it's like, I might have lost 5% on that trade, but I'm 10% closer to getting Caleb Williams, which is going to expedite this entire process. Sorry, I get excited when I hear you say the word rebuild. I just get excited. You know, that's my thing.
Yeah, no, that was mostly my thought. Basically, even if you need to overpay, if you're rebuilding, get your first back, because ultimately that's going to gain a lot more value than if you're holding on to Austin Eckler thinking, oh, I should be getting more for him, versus, you know, paying Eckler and a first for your hopefully 101. If that's all you have on your team, I would still go out and do it, because ultimately, if that pick, or even 102, 103, those top 2 or 3 picks hold so much more value in most classes, where you can then, as you say, cascade that pick into more and more first down the line.
And the veterans can get injured. Those picks can't. You know, we know they're the only assets that are going to continue to appreciate. What I want to talk about real quick as part of that protecting your draft capital is the way that I use draft picks. So if you look at my teams right now across my 17 leagues, I have 64 first round picks. I have like 5 thirds, because I don't keep thirds. You know, I use them as part of the process. And I have half as many seconds as I do first. So I want to talk real quick. My philosophy is on this is I use my seconds to tier up. You know, I use, for instance, you know, I might take John Mechie in a second to get to Chris Godwin. You know, I might take Juju in a second to get to a certain player and move up. And then thirds, I use to sweeten deals. Like, I rarely pick third rounders. Third rounders have an 8% hit rate. So I use them as that way to finish a deal. Do you have any particular ways that you go and think about second and third round picks, or just this is the asset that we have here?
I like thirds a lot, because my target with my third round rookie picks, maybe I shouldn't be giving out this secret, is I love taking shots on tight ends specifically.
Yeah.
Because we know that the hit rate on second round rookie picks and even third round rookie picks is incredibly low. But I have found over the last few seasons that the hype on tight ends who perform even a little bit goes way up. So you can, for example, the last couple seasons, you could have bought low on David Njoku for a third at one point, where people were way out on him. Guys like Chig Okonkwo.
Okonkwo.
I can't say his name. Okonkwo, excuse me. You could have gotten him for a third, right? And now you can sell him for a second, maybe more in some leagues with the hype that's growing there.
Trey McBride was in that area, you know, and there's some guys I know you are starting to target that are, you know, Laporta was one that was in that third range. He's obviously shot way up almost into early to mid second. But then there's some other guys like Musgrave. There's these tight ends that get high draft capital, but they fall to the third round because we have the narrative that it takes longer for them to, you know, 2 to 3 years. And then, but they still have the draft capital. Yeah.
Right. Like we talked about Njoku, but now you can get, if you believe in Irv Smith, right, you can get him for a third. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have soured a ton on Dalton Schultz. You could probably get him for a couple thirds, depending on the league. So for whatever reason, it seems like I'm always grabbing tight ends with my third round rookie picks. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, but I would at least explore that option. That's one of my favorite things to do with my third round rookie picks.
So I'm going to skip over number 6. And I'm going to go to number 7 because we just talked about it. It's develop your own methodology, right? I was just sharing what I do. You were sharing what you do, but it's what's successful for you, right? Like we can, like I write up a lot of blueprints of this is how I do what I do, and ultimately we're all playing the same game. But it's amazing when you start to when I call Zoltan up and I'm like, hey, what are you doing with this trade? And he does the same thing, and it's like we get to the same conclusion, but in a different way. And you and I do that a lot too, where it's like we get to the same outcome sometimes on our dynasty teams and things like that. But then it's a matter of how do we get there. So when we're talking about our dynasty methodology, dynasty's meant to be fun. But in order to do that, you need to work on your certain patterns, your habits, just like things in life. Like we talk about the most successful people in life have a pattern. They have habits. They have daily routines, And for me, I'm like, this is what I do on a Monday. This is what I do on a Tuesday. Every Tuesday night before I go to bed, I'm scouring that waiver wire. Every Wednesday, once I see what happens, I start to see what some of the trends are of people who are picking up on Wednesday. And then I'll start to make some trade offers, and kind of move into that way. I think that is something where you look at the patterns of your teammates, you look at what you have, and then it's listen to the best guys out there. I mean, I love looking at Mung's content. We talk about it a lot. Some of my favorites, and when we talked about Scott Connor, I was blown away just talking philosophy with him last week, just because we only tapped into it a little bit, and the way he talks about it, the way Zoltan does, the way Chad Parson does. There's so many guys in the industry where they're not talking about having conversations about, this player or that player. They're talking about deeper meanings, deeper thought processes on how you do this. And that's how ultimately, in my mind, you become successful as dynasty. I mean, we can all pick that Josh Jacobs is going to do this year, or Miles Sanders that year, what those guys are going to be, but is it going to hit? Or are you going to bank on the principles and the patterns and the habits that you do for your dynasty teams?
Yeah, and it's just, again, like any life lesson, these dynasty lessons have the same application, right? And really just absorb as much knowledge as you can as you're crafting these strategies, right? Even if you don't play as much redraft anymore, if you've never played best ball, check out one or two of those podcasts, because sometimes those strategies kind of cross over, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, a lot of that stuff's correlated. I talk all the time about how my dynasties rankings align much more closely with my redraft rankings in season, because mm-hmm. it is driven more so by current production at that point. And also the market sentiment is driven a lot more by what's happening week to week, right? And at the same time, something we talked about with Scott last week on last week's episode was stacking with, if I believe in Anthony Richardson, maybe I do pick up a few more shares of Michael Pittman along the way, because ultimately, even though that's more of a best ball concept, at the same time, it makes sense that, let's say you're high on Justin Fields as a passer, then you should be higher on DJ Moore than the market, right? Or on the other hand, if you don't believe in Justin Fields, you just like him purely for his rushing production, then maybe you try and sell the DJ Moore to the team that has Justin Fields, who does believe in it. So it's all about, kind of looking at the same picture from a lot of different angles.
I loved what he was saying, not just the stacking there of the players that we talk about. Oh, I have a Burrow Chase stack, that's okay. That's great. What he was talking about was on a deeper level where you look at the wide receiver threes, if you're going to stack, he said in particular, if you have Kenny Pickett, then you should be going after the Deontay Johnson or a guy that's a wide receiver 3, because that's going to ultimately make your team better, where the stack when you have Jalen Waddle and Tua, that's nice. But he's like, where you really start to make some headway is when you get, your Brandon Ayuk, and we're not going to say if it's Purdy or Lance, or your Terry McLaurin and Sam Howell, or those lesser quarterbacks with those wide receiver 3s, which I thought was a brilliant principle that I hadn't even thought of. Tying in with number 7, I'm going to go back to number 6, because it kind of goes with your methodology, but I put is learn your risk tolerance. So, I mean, this is another principle, kind of like business. There's some managers like myself, I like to go all in. If a guy's I've always been willing to take those risks. I was buying, Tyreek Hill for super low prices, second round picks. A couple places I got him for third round picks when they were talking about suspension or kicking out of the NFL. There's guys that have had those situations where Calvin Ridley is a great example. I was buying him for late second round picks and even a pair of third round picks when he got suspended, because people were like, well, I don't know if he's going to come back. Now look at that. I mean, he's fetching a late first, early second. There's so many ways where, and on the flip side, I mean, there's ways that can hurt you too, but that's become part of my methodology. Is I am actually going after that. I'm looking at those guys because there are a lot of owners that are really, or dynasty managers that are very risk averse. Like, I don't want this player on my team anymore. I'm going to cash out for whatever I can get on that player, or those guys that don't believe in, running backs that are coming back post injuries. There's so many things where you can exploit that, or they can exploit it on you. You, on the other hand, you are very risk averse. You're very calculated. We're literally polar opposites in some of these ways when we talk about the way we make trades. And I think it's about finding that blend that works for you. How do you enjoy the game is crucial. You want to avoid that stress. Like, if I told you last year you had to buy, player X who was super risky, that doesn't make it fun for you, right? And if you tell me, you know what, Mike, don't buy. Wow, I call myself Mike instead of Dad. That never happened. But if you were like, hey, don't buy this player, I'd be like, whoa, I want to be involved in that risk, because for me, I get a kick out of that, where it's like, man, I invested in this guy when he was at his low, and now all of a sudden, look at this penny stock. Look what it's done now.
Yeah, and it's all price dependent, right? Because I just talked about how out I was on Gabriel Davis last offseason because he was going for a first. And now you can get him for a late second, maybe even a third in some leagues. People are super out on Davis all of a sudden after his down year. And I'm still not the biggest believer, but I'm willing to take a shot on potentially Josh Allen's number 2 wide receiver if the price is a late second all of a sudden, right? We talked about everything being driven by ADP and how you value players versus the market. So again, I consider risk when a player is high priced. But like you said, even if you didn't believe in Calvin Ridley, which I was adverse on last season because he was going to be away from football for such a long time. But if somebody said, hey, I'm selling for a third, I would still been all over that, because it's all about gauging where you are on a player versus the cost to acquire.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in on that. And I think when we talk about that, it's just a matter of the price. There's so many guys that we talk about where their price. Deshaun Watson was another one that was prime in that, right? Like, there were so many people that were willing to sell for any first round pick. Now he's approaching 2 first round picks, maybe even more. And he's going to be a first round pick here in the next, couple of weeks. And to a point where I think he's almost a lock to get himself back in that top 5 to 8 in quarterback range. But if you took the risk, you had that opportunity. Other people are like, I just don't want him on my team. Like, I don't want that kind of risk, and I don't want to go there. Number 8, always use a stop loss. So this is one where early on in my dynasty, career, if you will, I would be that manager who would derail my future by making one trade to try to fix another, right? So I would make a trade and that guy didn't hit. And then I'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to try to fill that void in with something else now, right? I'm going to use my 24 first, or I'm going to try to sell the farm to make this fixed, right? Or there's those guys that, we talk a lot, and that's why I've kind of adapted to the top 3, bottom 3 is that gives you a place to go, right? If you believe in that top 3, bottom 3 mentality, that helps you move in a direction to avoid that mediocrity, where I feel like a stop loss, having a spot where you're like, okay, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm not just going to try to fill in the gap. I'm either going to go this way or I'm going to go that way. So, teams that come to me all the time, they say, Dad, I need to buy player X for my first right now to compete. And I always say this. I was like, if you need to buy Joe Mixon to compete with your 24 first, you're not ready to compete. You're not in that area. Now is not the time to do those things. We all want to have that stopgap, that stop loss, that spot where it's like you feel safe, but you have to know when's enough, right? Like, I think that's the tricky part, that dynasty owners just continue to trade after trade after trade, which leads into step 9. So 8 is having that stop loss. 9 is knowing when to stop. So talk to me a little bit about that, because we do it so much. We just trade, right? We want to trade because there's not much to do. Like we're in our dynasty leagues and you're like, well, we did the rookie draft. I should maybe make a trade real quick.
Yeah, and it's in some ways it's like the stock market, right? Because there's the age-old expression, you haven't taken a loss until you sell, right? Mm-hmm. And a good example is I'm a big proponent of Disney long-term as a stock. I bought Disney after they announced that they were getting into the streaming platform, Disney Plus. I think I bought around 110, 120, something along those lines. It soared for a while. It was up to 180, 190, and now it's back down. It's around $95, something along that. But the whole time I've just held my shares, right? And I haven't sold. And a perfect example of that could be Elijah Moore, where he was getting a lot of hype last offseason. Mm-hmm. Maybe you bought for a first, right? Maybe you bought for a future first. And obviously the Jets just simply didn't use him at all last year. And Garrett Wilson had this meteoric rise. And if you would have said, oh man, I missed on Elijah Moore, which you did at that point, right? I wasn't super high on him, but I bought a couple shares here and there. And all of a sudden he's just doing nothing. And what are you going to do? Send out offers trying to sell him for a second, a third, right? At that point, what is the actual reward for getting a late round pick where we know the hit rates are low anyway? Mm-hmm. So I've held on to a couple shares of Elijah Moore, and now he gets traded to the Browns. He's getting quite a bit of hype in OTAs, talking about how he's connecting with Deshaun Watson, and his value's rebounding a little bit. So to your point, when you do miss on a player eval, when you do buy a player like an Elijah Moore or a Gabe Davis, who all of a sudden craters in value, maybe the best thing to do is just hold. Like you said, don't panic. Don't try to make trades to quote unquote fix the situation or to just to sell and get rid of the player. Because like Moore, Gabe Davis, we found out earlier this offseason that he was battling a high ankle sprain last season, right? So I still don't know that I believe in his talent, but I do think that he could still have opportunity in 2023. And if you bought Gabe Davis for a first, you might as well hold at this point, because what does selling for a third do for you other than the saying, oh, I just got him off my roster, I'm done. And you get some sort of sigh of relief when really you're not losing anything by just holding on to that roster spot, unless it's a super shallow bench and you're trying to pick up somebody else.
I get that a lot on Twitter when I put my dynasty sells. So, some of the guys that I've put as sells recently, it was DK Metcalf and Austin Eckler and George Pickens. And those are guys that have value because some people want them, right? When we talk about those sells where it's like you have to know when to, a lot of people are like, why don't you have Trey Lance as a sell? How can he be? Like, why? You invested 2 firsts in him. So why would you sell him now for 1 first or a second round pick? Like there's so many guys where you have to wait to see if they rebound. And if they don't, it's almost worth holding on to it, waiting for it to rebound, because if Trey Lance bounces back and starts over Brock Purdy, that value is going to rise up, incredibly. But if it doesn't, it's almost better just to hold on to that asset. And it's like, I see people right now trying to trade. They're like, yo, Dad, somebody offered me a 2025 fourth for Zach Wilson in Superflex. Should I take it? I want to get him off my team. You invested a top 5 first round pick on him. Like you trading him for a 4th round pick. Why bother? Like at that point, let him sit on your bench. And that's a piece that, eventually if Aaron Rodgers goes down, will have some value. I mean, it's a matter of knowing when. We talk about it a lot where we talk about buy high or buy low and sell high. It's not a matter of, in that particular instance, where you're buying high and then just selling for peanuts.
Well, yeah. And to your point, right, it's all about, again, knowing when to get out, right? Even with the bounce back and say someone who we just talked about, Elijah Moore, right? Even if let's just say from what I saw from him, I don't believe in him at all anymore. At that point, then maybe I do take the loss and I sell for a second, which is still worth something. I can trade that pick then for another player that maybe I believe in more now. So it's okay to take losses on players. But like you said, when Tyreek Hill, the news came out that maybe he was going to get suspended for a year, maybe longer. Again, maybe you do get out for a couple seconds, right? If you were super convinced that just he was never going to play again. But at the same time, why would you ever sell for a single third? When has a single third ever really became anything of value?
Well, you have to look at what that buys you, right? Like a single third buys you right now a Zach Evans or, an 8% hit rate type player, that Cedric Tillman, who you might like, but what are the options? How many third round picks have become where Tyreek Hill is? Like that's just not going to get it there. We're at least getting a pair of seconds. I can play around with that, see where you're going to go, in those type of situations. Deshaun Watson was another one, and it's just a matter of knowing when. And all the people that you could tell where the people that don't like risk or like, I want him off my team, let's get him out of here early, and if you're going to do that, then you need to do it. It's all about timing. Like it is a very difficult thing to do, and it's not just get rid of them.
Yeah, or even, Kamara, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe he was a sell, but the league has yet to announce a suspension. And I think it will come, but who knows, right? And obviously if you do sell for a second, I think that's still okay value. But again, the people who are selling for thirds are just complete panicking or quote unquote on tilt, right? And that's when you don't want to let your emotions rule your dynasty trade offers.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk a lot more values in the upcoming weeks. And it was just like Mixon and Kamara were guys that I'm getting in rounds 8, 9, and 10 of startups because of that, that fear right there. The next part that I want to talk about when we're talking about knowing when to stop trading is something that I've really tried to do is keep my emotions out of trading. I love Jalen Hurts, right? I was buying him everywhere. I've been trading Jalen Hurts in a couple situations where I'm getting huge rewards. Do I want to get rid of Jalen Hurts? No, I want to root for him and I want to do that. But I got to look at sometimes looking at the trading picture as profiles and assets, not like I like player X, but I don't like player Y. I had a guy and I messaged him. I was like, what would you give me for Dak Prescott? Because I'm trying to move off this way. He goes, I don't want Dak Prescott on any of my teams. I don't care what the offer is. Don't even bother. And that's like, you don't like QB1 production, like look at it as a production profile. When we had Jordan McNamara on last year, he was talking about that with Josh Jacobs, where Josh Jacobs, remember we had the Hall of Fame game where he was getting carries and everybody was selling Josh Jacobs for peanuts. And he's like, look at the profile. Don't look at what you feel right now. Look at the profile. This guy's a round 1 draft capital. This guy's done this. He's this athletic profile. Don't just say, oh man, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good right now. I should move off of him. So the emotions part sometimes clouds our judgment when we're making dynasty trades.
Yeah, and that's part of why I try to be as objective as possible when I look at the Lance and Purdy situation, because I was so high on Lance. So I have to do my best to step back and evaluate that quarterback situation as unbiased as I can be, right? Obviously, I do have bias, and I recognize that. But at the same time, when people were, starting to really jump on the hype train on Purdy pre-injury, when you look at it, when was the last late round quarterback pick? When was the last true great quarterback who was drafted that late? And if your answer is Tom Brady, I'm sorry.
Just a couple of years ago.
Right. That is the outlier of outliers, that, the greatest quarterback ever, that you think this could be replicated so easily. Right. And that's not to say Purdy can't succeed, especially in a strong system like Kyle Shanahan's. But at the same time, don't, take away the name of the player and look at the situation and the historical hit rates. And yes, getting outliers is how you win in fantasy. You have to recognize that outliers are outliers for a reason.
I like it. The other part about knowing when to stop trading, and this is one where some of my most favorite dynasty trades are when we go back and forth 10 times. Adam Armour, shout out to him. We have some of the best trades ever because we'll just go back and forth. But the tricky part, Mung, is, you offer me these 3 players for these 2 players. And then I say, add this and add that. And then we get to a point where so many people will reach out to me and they're like, what do I do now? Now he wants too much. You walk away, right? Like you don't have to take it. There's so much in the trade negotiation where people feel like the back and forth, like they have to give in, right? It's just like you're buying a used car, or okay, let's knock $2,000 off the price. And then he comes back and he knocks this off. And they're like, no, you know what? Let's get some new tires on here. This might be 1980s car negotiation as opposed to now. But, you start negotiating back and forth, and then you get to a point where it doesn't benefit you anymore. So you walk away. Sometimes you walk away and you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take some time on this, but at the current price, I'm out. And I told someone to do that the other day in the Patreon. And then they said that the exact thing, like, hey, I kind of like the players in here, but this particular deal isn't working for me. I'm going to start to look around, but thanks for the offer. And I'll put my original back on the table. 2 days later, he accepted the original because we went back to that where it was a matter of he started thinking about, I really want that that trade possibility. So talk to me a little bit about when to walk away, because there's so many new dynasty owners out there. They just don't know. So they're just like back and forth, and they feel like there has to be an exact equation that makes that trade right, or else, they just don't know what to do.
Yeah, to your point, I get DMs. I got one, I think a couple weeks ago, where it was a lot of different iterations of the same trade. And at the end of the day, I gave my advice on each version, and I said, it sounds like you guys are just too far apart on these players. And sometimes it's okay to say, hey, I think we're far apart on these players. I don't think we're getting anywhere. It's nothing personal, but maybe we should just hold on to our guys for now. And that's fine. And also, people have this tendency, like you said, where you really want to get that deal done. So you keep sending counters back and forth. And sometimes I found, I send a trade offer. For example, I won't say which league, but I just sent an offer of Kenny Pickett plus 3 firsts for Lamar Jackson in a Superflex league. And it got declined. And I didn't send another offer adding in a couple seconds or whatever. I'm going to wait and see. Maybe Kenny Pickett has a pretty decent preseason. Maybe the hype grows a little bit, and I'll send the exact same offer in a month or 2 months from now and just see what happens. Because sometimes just over time, everyone's perception and valuation of different players is going to change, right? It changes based on good Twitter threads of stats that we read. It changes sometimes based on one throw from OTAs or one catch from OTAs, and all of a sudden everybody loves this player, right? Amir Abdullah is a great example of that from a few years back. So again, it really just depends, and sometimes it's okay not to get a deal done right that minute or even that day or that week, and you really can take time to reevaluate things and see do you really want to get this trade done because you think this player's value is going to skyrocket, or can you maybe wait, especially in the offseason when there's less news, and see if things change in a month or two?
Yeah, and I think right now, before we actually start preseason and a little bit deeper into OTAs, the value is not going to change a lot in the next month for most players, and that's where when this guy came to me, he said, well, I got to get this done. Like player X is about to blow up. What news is going to happen that's going to shift it in that direction? There are very few things that are going to happen to really push a guy, his value to go up until a little bit later in the season. So that leads us to number 10. And this is our last one. And this is kind of fun just to kind of go over these again, where just, rules for successful trading. Step number 1, always have a trade plan. Number 2, treat trading like it's a business. Number 3, use your dynasty resources. 4, protect your draft capital. 5, become a student to the trade market. 6, learn your risk tolerance. Number 7, develop your own methodology. 8, always use that stop loss. Number 9, know when to stop trading. And number 10, keep the trade windows in perspective. I think you've done this with me on multiple occasions where you're just like, Dad, chill. Like, that's not what we're kind of doing. But we look at it where trade values in February are different than trade values when we get closer to the season. Right now, you look at the time period from February to August moves all over the place, right? It's a matter of, we talk about the cyclical nature. From February up until August, veterans are discounted. The young upside is increased. The rookie picks get increased. Then once we get to August, we talk about, now we're in that area where so many people are trying to improve their roster right now. You want that value of your roster. You're not worried about that starting lineup until we get closer, until we get to late July, until we get to August, until we get to September. So that, I say, when we get to September and November, that's where we trade to improve our lineups, our depth of our linemen. Why do I keep saying linemen? We want more linemen. And then we really consolidate those assets once we know what our team looks like. But there are definite windows of when to trade and how to make small moves in those windows.
Yeah, I love trading for players that I believe in right after bad news hits, right? So depending on when this pod releases over the next day or two, Matt Harmon just tweeted out the reception perception for Kadarius Toney with a lot of red on it, where there are a lot of routes that he doesn't run that well yet. He wasn't that great. People are freaking out over him. And this is exactly when I want to send out offers for Toney, where maybe people who previously were really high on him all of a sudden are having second thoughts. And so now perhaps I can actually maybe not get him for super cheap, but at least get my foot in the door, right? At least get a not auto decline.
And Matt Harmon's that perfect guy. He's one of the few guys that I have notifications on because his reception perception changes the perception of what people think. I mean, I've never seen a tool where people are like that. You know, it is a great tool. It's not, again, it's not an end all be all, but it will like guide people to, I don't want that guy because of, you know, George Pickens' value died when we saw his reception perception and how much red was on there. You know, other guys, you see theirs just skyrockets when you see how much green is on there. And
Jahan Dotson, right?
Yeah.
Who I liked a lot, but now I'm not buying for a first plus, right?
Yep.
And then vice versa, just looking at news in general, right? Especially when it's the rumor mill. When for a while you could have gotten Elijah Moore for a third because all of a sudden it's, DeAndre Hopkins might want to reunite with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. And then 2 days later, it's like, not really. Or right now, a guy who I believe in, Devon Achane, who I'm buying because everyone thinks Dalvin Cook's going to land in Miami. And, you know, we have nothing necessarily to support that other than there's mutual interest. There's still contracts to work out. And I've tweeted out before that I think they would have different roles anyway. But right now, maybe someone who was pretty high on Achane all of a sudden is having severe second thoughts. And you can get them for a little bit less than it would have taken just a week or two ago.
I like that. I mean, you did try to get both Toney and Achane off me, so we're
I
getting
sent the trade offer to you this morning.
I know, right? And
so I put into practice what I'm preaching.
And I didn't respond, so I didn't put into practice what I'm preaching because you got me thinking a little bit. We talked about news, but I mean the news right now, and I know for those people that listen towards the end, I mean right now I see people panic selling Saquon Barkley. They're panic selling Josh Jacobs, and I mean these are two running backs who are going to make $10 million a year. And I know they want to create the idea that running backs are going to start getting paid and start making, you know, all that extra money. But it's a matter of like, these guys are both talking about holding out, but Mung, I mean, they're going to be paid at $10.5 million this year. We saw the last major running back to hold out and just play this game was Le'Veon Bell. And when you hold out on the franchise tag, you got to do it again next year. You know, like if you don't play 6 games, you could get franchise tagged again next year. And I think I am seeing a lot of people panic selling Saquon Barkley. I saw someone sell him today for Dameon Pierce and Tajay Spears. And I literally almost I was like, whoa, like let's pump the brakes here. Same with Stephon Diggs. You know, we're talking about he didn't show up to day 1 of mandatory camp, but the reports say that he is in Buffalo. He talked to McDermott, you know, so how do you make some moves on those kind of things? You know, like these seem like they're just news to be news at this point, but how do you play the market that way?
Yeah, and that goes back to what we said a little while ago on this episode of just absorbing as much information as you can, right? Like a sponge, and just getting more understanding of football and the business side of things in general, not just player A had this many yards over expectation and this much target share with this quarterback split versus the other quarterback, but also, you know, with the evolution in the new CBA that they adopted a little while ago, it's really hard to hold out now, right? It's almost impossible, which isn't necessarily good because I do think players should have more power than the billionaire owners, but at the same time, it's super unrealistic to expect Jacobs or Barkley to actually hold out this entire season. Now, we've yet to see a soft holdout. Maybe a player just says they're, ankle sprained in practice every single week, and I don't know if I can go type of deal and still get paid. We haven't seen any situations like that, so maybe it's still possible. But again, it's just understanding how these negotiations go, right? Because again, even going back to Deshaun Watson, where people are saying he's never going to play again, and then he gets the highest paid contract in NFL history. So just kind of understanding how teams will wait to do things based on PR and based on the leverage that they think they have.
Yeah, and I think the last time we saw anything close to that was maybe Melvin Gordon. I think he held out partially in the beginning of the season and then came back and played the final 8 to 10 weeks or something like that. But Mug, this was fun because we didn't even talk about any dynasty trades. We talked about how to make them. And, I saw after Scott came on here, he posted a tweet. Anybody want to have a 1 hour podcast and not drop a name? And I think we did a good job of just talking about the principles of it. And hopefully this helps you guys, because there's so many new people joining into the Dynasty community, joining in on Dynasty Twitter, joining in on the Smash Accept, family. And we just wanted to give you guys some tricks. I have this out there on a tweet format. If you guys want to go out there and bookmark that and check it and kind of check on these. If you have questions for Mung and I based on how it's awesome in the Patreon, because they can ask you, they can ask me, and we're totally different on how we're thinking about those things. And again, you don't have to align with, we're not telling you which way to do it. You can align with Mung, you can align with myself, however your methodology is. And I think that's the most important thing out of this for me is don't just play this blind. Don't just say, I feel like that's redraft. You're playing it, you make your plan, you're going to win. In Dynasty, it's like, you got to have a little bit deeper. You got to play chess when everybody else is playing checkers. And we do that a lot at Smash Accept. Mung, any more takeaways from tonight's episode?
Yeah, just one final note for the listeners who stick around till the end. Every player has value, right? Especially in deeper bench formats and in super flex formats. People who passed on Bailey Zappi last year because, they have Mac Jones, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I still think Mac Jones is the guy in New England. Don't get me wrong. But at a certain point when Zappi was slipping to the late third or so, right? At that point, hey, he's at least worth a shot. And even if you flipped him for a second midway through last season, that was profit right there, right? Or you talk about guys like Skylar Thompson, who even if you paid a fourth or got him off the waiver wire, you could have sold him for maybe a third at the point where Tua went down, maybe more. Right. And even looking at guys this year, right? Hendon Hooker slipping into the late second in a lot of super flex rookie drafts, right? Jared Goff is the starter right now in Detroit, but we've seen a long track record of Goff being mediocre, and he had a great season last year. I'm not taking anything away from that. But again, do we believe that he's a long-term true starter in the NFL or for the Lions for that matter? Right. And then even guys who we've talked about, deep sleepers, Stetson Bennett. Right. Oh, he's old. He's nothing special athletically, but hey, Matthew Stafford had a lot of injury issues last year. He seems healthy right now, but who knows? One concussion and all of a sudden you can get maybe a third, maybe even a second for Stetson Bennett from the right dynasty GM. So again, every player has value and is worth stashing if you know the right time to sell or the right time to buy.
And I've been telling people, the fourth round of Superflex rookie drafts, my rebuild on Smash 7, I got Hooker in the late second. The fourth, I had 3 fourth-round picks. I got Stetson Bennett, Dorian Thompson Robinson, like some of these guys that, it's a wild card. Like if we talk about it, late startups or late rookie drafts, if you're taking a round 6 wide receiver, the hit rate on that is next to nothing. But a guy like Stetson Bennett, he will get some starts this year. Matthew Stafford with that offensive line is going to lead towards that. Dorian Thompson Robinson. There's like all these guys that you could see a scenario where they get a start and they're instantly worth more than what you paid for them. So I love this episode. It was a lot of fun. Thank you guys for tuning in and enjoy the process.